Keep on slipping. Hey, what's up guys? Double O Slipping here, ready to make a video about how to analyze and choose optimal starting locations. For this video, I'm just going to leave it random leader. I'm going to leave everything pretty standard except for DD difficulty. I'm going to plug in Barbarians and Clans mode and Secret Societies mode in case we roll any start locations I want to play through. All right, here we have our first settling location. Now, if you're new to Civ 6, this is what your map is going to look like. What I suggest is you take your mouse cursor, you bring it over to map options, you click that on and you see show yield icons, you click that box on. And that's going to show every single yield of every single tile around you. This is a very helpful tool. I never ever play without this on. Every single one of my games has this on 24/7. Okay, another thing I want to talk about is if you take your mouse cursor and you move it to the left and you click on lenses and then you click on settler, it will show you all the fresh water on the map. Now, the fresh water gives you a housing bonus. So to start off, your capital city center will get 3 housing. It gets 2 by default, it gets 1 from the palace, and then it'll get a housing bonus depending on if you settle on fresh water, coastal water, or on no water at all. So the red tiles is where you can't settle cities, so you don't have to worry about those. If you settle a city on a gray tile, your city center will have 3 housing. If you settle a city on coastal water, say one of these 2 tiles, the lighter green tiles, you will have a +4 housing capital city center. But if you settle a city on these darker green tiles, you will have a +6 housing city center. I always try to settle a city on fresh water. If I can't, I always try to settle a city on coastal water. Now, one more thing to talk about is a city center will always get 2 food, 1 production minimum. It can have more, but it can't have less. So let's talk about what comes into play when we go to settle a city. So first things first, we have features. So a feature is something like a rainforest, woods, marsh, and stone. So when we go to settle a city, it's going to ask us if we want to remove the feature. So do you want to found the city here? It will remove the rainforest on this tile, right? So features add yields to the tile. So a rainforest adds a food to any given tile. So a plains hill is naturally 1 food, 2 production. So if I settle a city here, it will remove the rainforest. Now, like I was saying before, the city center is 2 food, 1 production minimum. So if I remove the rainforest and then add a city center, this tile will be 2 food, 2 production. The city center will be 2 food, 2 production. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, another thing that comes into play, and before I move on, it's the same with the woods, right? If I try to settle a city on woods, it will ask me if I want to remove. Now, woods add 1 production to tiles, right? Because this is a grassland hill, this is also a grassland hill. But because there's woods on this grassland hill, this tile has 1 extra production over this tile here. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's the same with the stone, and the marsh add food to their tile. Okay, another thing that comes into play is bonus resources. So a good example of bonus resources is, say, this rice or this copper. Okay, so if I decide to settle a city on a bonus resource, the yields from that bonus resource will stick with the city center. And I'll show you exactly what that means. As a matter of fact, I'll just show you some examples right now. So if I decide I want to move my settler over to this rice and settle the city. Now my city center is 2 food, 1 production, right? So that means I'm going to add a production to the rice tile. And as you can see, my city center is 3 food, 1 production. Now let's bring it back for a second. So say I wanted to settle a city here, like I was saying, and I settle a city, remove the rainforest, add my city center. Now I have a city center that is 2 food, 2 production. Plains hills are absolute god when settling cities. I always try to shoot for a plains hill if I can get it. Sometimes you don't have that option, but it is nice when you do end up landing on one. Okay, so now we have the copper as well. Say I wanted to settle a city here. There's no water here, so obviously I would never do this, but say there was a river running along this side of the hex, right? Let's just pretend for a second. And I decide I'm going to move here. I settle my city. Now my city center has 2 food, 1 production, and 2 gold. And that's because my city center is always going to be 2 food, 1 production minimum. And the tile that was there before had 1 production and 2 gold. So the city center actually fundamentally just added 2 food to that tile. All right, now that we got those 2 examples kind of out of the way, and we've talked about that, in this particular situation, Phoenicia is a coastal civ. It's a naval civ, and they do better when they settle cities on coast. Now, in this sort of situation here as well, like say I was playing apocalypse mode, volcanoes tend to erupt and destroy everything around in 2 rings around. And what I mean by that is these first 6 tiles touching the volcano, that's the first ring. The second ring is every tile after that, right? So if you're playing on apocalypse mode, you got to keep in mind that that volcano will pillage your city center. It will kill population. It will destroy your districts and so on and so forth. So on a regular game with normal disaster intensity, it tends to only affect the first ring. So I would usually just move over a tile. Now with Phoenicia, she has the special district of the cotton or the cotton. So in this sort of situation, I would be tempted to settle a city either on the copper, which I know is only coastal water, but if I settle the city here, I would get the extra 2 gold from that. Or even better, I would probably settle a city right here. And that's because there is this sheep here. So I settle a city here. And I come into the city. And I force my citizen to start working this. And my city center will grow in 5 turns. Now, another thing we should talk about is citizen. Everybody gets 1 free citizen, and it's the citizen that works into your city center. And then every other citizen outside of your city center costs you 2 food. So between these 2 citizens, we're getting 5 food and 2 production. And because we have 1 citizen parked outside of the city center, that means a profit of 3 food, 2 production. Now, you may be looking and seeing, well, you're making 4 production. My palace is giving me 2 production. You can see that we're getting 1 culture, 5 gold, 2 production, 2 science, 1 housing, 2 amenities from entertainment, and 1 great work slot in our palace. So in this sort of situation, this probably would have been my ideal starting location. As well, we would have had a pretty good spot for a harbor. Not the best harbor I've ever seen, but this is at least a +3 harbor, because a harbor gets +1 from every single bonus resource in the water and +2 from being next to the city center. All right, so we've rolled Australia for a second example. Now, Australia is a pretty unique civ. They have some special bonuses when it comes to settling cities. They get +3 housing in all coastal cities. So automatically, it's almost like getting a free river. So we don't have to worry so much about settling next to rivers. If we do settle on a coast and next to a river, I think we get like +9 housing in our capital city right off the get-go. Now, you get a free warrior every time you start a game. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk my warrior up the coast and see what's in this direction. Okay, so we got some oranges. We got a travel village there, which is nice. We got some very nice productive tiles over here, some plains hills, which is cool. And right now, what I'm looking at is where I am in this situation right down here. There is very little food. There is not 1 tile within the first ring of where I'm standing that has 2 food. So this is actually a really not a horrible starting location. I've definitely had worse, but this is a really bad starting location for sure. If I settled in place, my city center would have a 2 food, 2 production. If I moved over, 2 food, 2 production. And if I settled a city on this dead tile, my city center would have a 2 food, 1 production, because the bare minimum of a city center is 2 food, 1 production. Now, I usually have a rule about moving my settler too many times. So what I would do in this sort of situation is I would move over and I would move again, and I'd settle the city right on the oranges. Now, we do have better food over here. We have a worse harbor than if we had settled the city right here. If we would have settled the city right here, we would have had a +4 harbor, which would have been really nice, but we do have a +3 harbor in this city as well. We start out with a city center that has 3 food, 1 production because of the oranges. Not to mention, now we have a luxury resource that we can sell and trade to the AI. This would have been my settling location if I had spawned this. And our capital city starts out with 7 housing, which is insane. because we start out with 2 default, 1 from the palace, so that's 3. Then we get an extra for coastal, and we get +3 because we're Australia. All right, for our third example, we have rolled Khmer. Now, I do plan on doing a game with Khmer. So looking at the starting location, I'm seeing some pretty good tiles in the first ring, just to start out with. We have 2 food, 2 production tiles next to the city center, which would be really, really cool. Now, I'm kind of curious to see what is up here. Not very different. In this situation here, I would probably just settle in place. So we got rid of the marsh and we got a 2 food, 1 production. This is where I would settle in this situation. Khmer also gets some pretty insane river bonuses when it comes to their holy site, so we got to keep that in mind when we're playing Khmer. All right, this is a pretty interesting starting location. So we've spawned as Mavemba Nzinga. This is actually a really nice one. I might actually even save this so that I can do a playthrough. So right away, I'm looking at this and we're on a Plains Hill. So right off the bat, this is a perfect place to settle. It is interesting that we have a few luxuries over here, so we've got to keep that in mind when we think about settling a city. And there's a volcano over here. We're not playing on apocalypse mode, so if we actually moved one over, it wouldn't be the end of the world. And if we move one over, 1, 2, 3, we could possibly settle a city right here, right next to the truffles. Now, we would be moving away from the spices, which I'm not a huge fan of. We do have some more spices over here, which is really nice. So actually, this is actually a really nice starting location because we can settle cities on the river. There's a nice long river. There's a bunch of luxuries, and the spices are actually a pretty insane luxury resource as far as I'm concerned. I believe they add 2 food, 1 production to the tile they're sitting on. No, sorry, 2 food, because this is a grassland tile with woods, so that would be 2 food, 1 production, so that it adds 2 food to the tile that it's sitting on. Now, another interesting thing about this starting location is it actually opens an opportunity to talk about something else. If I decided to settle a city here, say I said, I don't want to be on the Plains Hill, I'm going to settle a city right here. The benefits from that is there's a river that runs mostly around my entire city center. There's just this one open spot. Rivers add +5 defense to any city center or to any unit, right? So if I parked an archer here or a warrior or whatever, right? And there's a barbarian over here and they decide to attack me, I automatically get +5 combat strength from being across a river. It's the same with city centers. So if you decide to settle a city behind a river, you get +5 combat strength. Now, I'm pretty sure you get +3 combat strength from settling on a hill. So that's that's the pros and cons of where you're going to settle. In this situation here, I would probably settle a city in place only because I want to leave myself room to settle a city downriver. So I would settle a city here. I would start working the bananas right off the get-go. And that way my city grows a little bit quicker. And I would send my warrior upriver to find new settling locations. Now in this situation, it's pretty obvious what I would do. I would probably move over to this Plains Hill and I would settle a city right here. And the reason why I did that is because of the river. Now my capital city has 6 housing. I'm right next to a luxury resource. I'm next to some pretty productive hills, and I have a food tile right here as well. And I have the opportunity to place a canal here and possibly an industrial zone right here and a harbor here. And that would be the setup that I would kind of do. Unfortunately, in this situation, there isn't that much food in the beginning, but I would be able to make this work. So this is kind of a tricky situation. So you can tell that there's a tile down here that has faith. So I would send my warrior down to scope that out. So obviously there's a wonder down there. I would be more tempted to settle toward the water so that I can get a nice capital city. Now, unfortunately, there isn't very much production in this area. This is actually a very bad start as far as I'm concerned. I'm almost tempted to even move along the Fox just so that I can get a little bit of a chance to some better production over this way. So I would probably move over, I would move my warrior down, and we got the delicate arch. So we would definitely start building maybe a holy site around here. There's definitely room for that somewhere down here. But for my capital city, I would probably place it right on the fox. And I would settle a city here. And I would automatically get the foxes underneath. That would grant me with 3 food, 1 production, and 1 gold. We get an automatic luxury in our empire. As well, we have the ability to build a really nice harbor here. That is a +4 harbor with the 2 bonus resources right there. We could build mausoleum here. We could put a aqueduct here, a dam here, and an industrial zone right here. And that would be a +5 industrial zone. All right, in this sort of situation, this would be a reroll probably. Either a reroll or a suck it up and just play the game out type of game. Automatically, I'm looking at this and I'm thinking I would probably move off of this tile. This is a grassland hill. So if I settle a city here, it would only be a 2 food, 1 production city center anyway. And since I'm lacking food and pretty good production, I mean, I do have the deer here. I have some woods here, but I'm lacking food. And this is our only tile within our 1 ring radius that has 2 food. I would probably move over here and I would settle the city in place. Yeah, I would probably settle right here and take advantage of what's near me and try to make it work. All right, in this situation here, we have spawned a Spain. Now, there's a couple of options. We can settle a city on this desert tile, and that'll give us a 2 food, 1 production city center. We have no food around us, so that doesn't really appeal to me. What I'm thinking I would do is I would take the settler and I would move over to the Mercury and settle a city on the first turn. Now my city center has 2 food, 1 production, and a science from the Mercury. Also, we have a luxury resource we can sell to the AI. Within a few turns, within the first, 5 to 10 turns, we're going to spread our borders, potentially pick up this cattle. If not, we can always buy this tile. And in this particular location, we have the opportunity to put a aqueduct here, a dam here, and an industrial zone here. And the reason why I placed the dam here is because a dam needs 2 sides of the hex touching the river to work. So we wouldn't be able to put a dam on this tile because it's only the corner being touched. So a dam needs 2 sides of the river, or 2 sides of the hex being touched by the river. As well, if we went for animal husbandry and we exposed horses, horses appear on flat grassland tiles and plains tiles. So there's an opportunity here for horses to appear. And horses give industrial zones a +1 adjacency bonus as well. So this would be a +5 right now. And if there was a horse here, it would be a +6. And if we place, say, another district or there was another horse here, it would be a +7 industrial zone. So that's how I would handle this settling location here. All right, this sort of situation is not very pretty. This is actually a pretty bad starting location as far as I'm concerned. So again, I'm looking at this starting location. There's not very much food around. The closest amount of food is this wheat tile here. Now, I like to settle a city on coastal if I can. Coastal river is usually my ideal starting location if I can get it. This situation is actually pretty bad. Yeah, in this sort of situation, I don't really know what I would do. I guess I would maybe just settle in place and take the hit on the food until we got this tile over here and just try to make it work. I would have to build some farm triangles and really have to use some builder charges to make this work. This sort of situation is tough to say. Yeah, I would probably settle the city right here. And the city will take 15 turns to grow, which is unfortunate. All right, we have rolled Frederick from Germany. I like Frederick. Frederick is cool. So looking at this starting location, I like the Plains Hill. I always like to settle on Plains Hill if I can. Yeah, looks like in this sort of situation, again, like, yes, the Plains Hill is pretty cool. I will give it that. But the bad thing is in the first ring, the 6 tiles touching the city center, if we settled in place, would be pretty terrible. Now, if I move 2 turns over towards the marsh, we will lose the marsh. Our city center will be 2 food, 1 production. But we have this sweet banana tile over here. We have this sweet sheep tile over here. So that's some pretty good growth tile in the first ring. And then in our second ring, we have another 2 food, 2 production tile. As well, we have the opportunity to potentially build a harbor. And hopefully there would be some sea resources over here that we would be able to take advantage of. So let's just start moving our settler over there and take a quick look. All right, so there's no bonus resources in this area. But now that I'm over here, there is another opportunity as well. If I settle the city on the sheep, my city center would have 3 food, 1 production. Now I would have to move another time over. So you know what? It wouldn't be worth it to me. In this sort of situation here, I would probably either settle a city in place, take advantage of the 2 food, 2 production right away, and then let my city grow out to the bananas and the sheep, or I would just move over and settle a city right here. And my capital city would be a coastal city, which means I would get a harbor. And I do believe we did pick continents for our map type. So I think that would be a good move as well. The Germans get a pretty cool U-boat at the end of the game. So that would actually play out really well on this map. Right from the beginning, we're working the sweet banana tiles. We're getting 3 food, 2 production, which means we're getting 3 food, 3 production profit between our 2 citizens right here. If anybody's wondering why my citizens are showing when I'm floating my cursor above my city, it's because I'm using a mod. It's the only mod that I use when I'm playing Civ. It is Sukritact UI Adjustment, I believe it's called. I think it's a super useful mod. It saves me from having to click on the city and then click on the manager to see what my citizens are working. And as well, it moves the attack button, the city strike button over to this side instead of right here. It's just super convenient. You know what? That's a pretty good start to analyzing and choosing starting locations. I hope anybody who's new to Civ has found this helpful. I think I'm going to call that the end of the episode. I appreciate you guys watching. If you've enjoyed this video or found it helpful, please hit that like button and drop me a comment. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. Thanks.